Hello, I'm Henry Keane. This is UATV English. We're online giving you the Ukrainian perspective of reality. Watch in the episode. Istanbul talks, the aftermath. Russia kills Ukrainian parents and abducts their children, calling it a salvation. Great Britain's army becoming even greater. Learn how. And even by just watching this episode, you help us fight off Russian aggression. Please comment and subscribe to our channel while watching it, as it helps Ukrainian voice to be heard worldwide. Welcome to the News Pulse. A new round of talks between Ukraine and the Russian aggressor took place on June 2nd. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan proposed hosting a high-level summit involving the leaders of Ukraine, Russia, the US and Turkey. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy responded positively, stating he is ready to participate in next talks.
I had a conversation with President Erdogan of Turkey, and indeed he signaled to me, asking how I would feel about a meeting of four leaders: himself, the US President, Donald Trump, Vladimir Putin, and me. I told him that I support a leaders' summit because I have the impression that a ceasefire won't happen without such a meeting.
The remarks came after a second round of Ukrainian-Russian peace talks in Istanbul, which led to an agreement of sorts on a new mass prisoner exchange, but made no progress on a ceasefire. To be more specific on the matter, the prisoner swap will happen, all for all, heavily wounded and ill prisoners of war between Ukraine and Russia. All young soldiers between 18 and 25 years old were agreed upon returning home. Also, 6,000 for 6,000 deceased soldiers. Exchange was agreed just as well. The United States President Donald Trump is reportedly open to Erdogan's invitation for three-way talks. The president has said he's open to it if it gets to that point, said White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt. He wants both leaders to sit down together. Meanwhile, Russian presidential aide Vladimir Medinsky said Moscow proposed a localized 2 to 3 day ceasefire to recover soldiers' remains in frontline areas, as he said. Here's what Zelenskyy answered to it.
They said they're ready for a 2 to 3 day ceasefire to collect bodies from the battlefield. I think they're idiots, because the whole point of a ceasefire is to prevent people from being killed in the first place. So you can see their mindset. It's just a brief pause in the war for them. Therefore, I really want our American partners to take strong steps to impose a package of sanctions.
The Istanbul talks concluded without a ceasefire agreement. Quite expectedly, Kiev reiterated its call for a full 30-day ceasefire, a proposal Russia rejected again. Putin's team is sticking to long-standing demands: annexation of 4 Ukrainian regions, recognition of Crimea as Russian territory, Ukraine's demilitarization and a NATO membership ban. Well, these demands are simply unacceptable. There simply is no space for a dialogue when a dialogue is about how legit it is to grab our land and kill our people. Still, we're looking forward to the next round of talks, whatever comes out of it. Today in the morning, Ukrainian SBU successfully attacked the illegal Kerch BRIDGE in Crimea. The underwater pillars of the piers are severely damaged, and the bottom level, 1,100 kilos of explosives in TNT equivalent, contributed to this. In fact, the bridge is in a state of emergency. Security Service of Ukraine added this is officially the third attack on the structure. A Ukrainian delegation led by Deputy Prime Minister Yulia Sviridenko and Chief of the Office of the President of Ukraine Andriy Yermak arrived in Washington to push for, obviously, defense support and stronger sanctions against Russia. The visit comes after recent peace talks in Istanbul ended without a ceasefire. In Washington, the Ukrainian officials plan to discuss the war effort, US arms purchases, the return of abducted Ukrainian children, and Russian disinformation campaign against Ukrainian religious institutions.
As part of the Ukrainian delegation headed by First Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Economy Yulia Sviridenko, I arrived in Washington, D.C. The team of the Ministry of Defense and the office is also with us. We will actively promote issues important to Ukraine. Our agenda is quite comprehensive. We plan to talk about defense support and the situation on the battlefield, strengthening sanctions against Russia, including Senator Graham's bill. We will also discuss the agreement on the establishment of the Investment Fund for Reconstruction, which we signed earlier. Andriy Yermak, head of the Office of the President of Ukraine, on Telegram.
President Volodymyr Zelenskyy said Ukraine is seeking new defense agreements with the US, including a potential free trade deal and arms purchases. We want to buy weapons. This is not about aid, but about partnership, he said. Trump has not approved new military aid packages, but the Ukrainian side hopes to secure weapons through purchase agreements. Also this week, Senate is expected to advance Senator Lindsey Graham's bill imposing 500% tariffs on goods from countries that buy Russian oil, gas and uranium. Back in Istanbul, Umerov condemned Russia's delay tactics and reiterated Ukraine's demand for a lasting truce. Despite Russia's refusal, both sides agreed to work on another large-scale prisoner swap. In an interview with ABC News, Keith Kellogg, US President Donald Trump's special envoy for Ukraine, stated that the United States considers Russia's concerns about NATO expansion fair and is ready to discuss the matter. And then Ukraine has been invited to the NATO summit, which will take place in The Hague on June 24-25. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy announced that, stating the importance of such an invitation. Also, the presidents of Lithuania, Poland and Romania have shared their joint opinion on the matter.
We stand firm on Allied decision and commitment regarding Ukraine's irreversible path to full Euro-Atlantic integration, including NATO membership. Ukraine has the right to choose its own security arrangements and to decide its own future, free from outside interference. Gitanas Nausėda, President of Lithuania, Andrzej Duda, President of Poland, Nicușor Jordan, President of Romania, in a joint preliminary summit in The Hague communiqué.
Well, here's a simple fact for you. With the rising pace of Ukrainian drone attacks efficiency and new high-tech weaponry development, I think Ukraine can agree not to join NATO, as it is NATO who should be considering joining Ukraine. One of the major points in, as Institute Study of War puts it, confidence building measures during peace talks is the return of all Ukrainian children and civilians and the exchange of all prisoners of war. With prisoners of war, it is more or less clear, all to all. Good. But the confidence in what exactly, I wonder, the Russian delegation is building when dismissing Russia's systematic kidnapping of Ukrainian children. Andrei Yermak reported that Ukrainian delegation gave Russia the names of hundreds of kidnapped Ukrainian children that Russia just must return home. And Medinsky claimed that the Ukrainian list contained 331 names, yet downplayed this list as not thousands or millions of children, but dozens, he said. Medinsky said that Russia returns Ukrainian children when Russian authorities will locate the children's parents or other legal representatives, and that Russia does not kidnap Ukrainian children, but saves them, as he puts it. The Institute Study of War puts it straightforward. What Medinsky is doing, he is downplaying the true extent of Russia's pre-war preparations, legal mechanisms and various schemes to hide and justify the forced deportation, forced assimilation and militarization of Ukrainian children. Just imagine the level of hypocrisy of the Kremlin. They invade Ukraine, murder Ukrainian parents, abduct their children, then re-educate these children and send their children back to Ukraine to kill more Ukrainian parents. Yale's Humanitarian Research Lab placed the number of deported children as close to 35,000 as of March 19, 2025. Kremlin's children's rights, so to say, Commissioner Maria Lvova-Belova, against whom the International Criminal Court issued an arrest warrant in March 2023 for abducting Ukrainian children, claims that Russia had accepted a stark 700,000 Ukrainian children between February 2022 and July 2023. The United Nations Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of Genocide explicitly forbids the forcible transfer of children from one group to another group for the purpose of destroying in whole or in part a national or ethnic group, and considers these violations as constituent acts of genocide. Well, if you or someone you know disagree and do not consider it a genocide, then it is for sure not your children that were abducted by Russia. On Tuesday, June 3rd, it is the 1196th day of war. Russia continues to shell Ukrainian cities daily, constantly. Last night, Kharkiv, Zaporizhzhia, Sumy and Poltava regions came under attack. In Kharkiv, Russian drone strikes a civilian enterprise and a postal terminal. They are murdered and injured. In Zaporizhzhia, it was a fire station. 12 people were injured. In Odessa, Russia targeted just civilians, injuring 5. In Chernihiv, a private home burned down to ashes after being struck by Shahid drones. A school, stores, bus stops, apartment buildings and industrial facilities were also damaged severely. 4 people were severely wounded. Around 9 a.m., Russia launched 5 long-range MLRS strikes on the center of Sumy city. Around 20 people were injured and at least 2 died. The strikes damaged a medical facility, cars and residential buildings. Do any of these sound like military targets to you? In the northern part of the Sumy region, Russian officials have long called for the creation of a buffer zone, as they put it, and they've recently stepped up efforts to set the information stage to justify renewed offensive operations towards the city of Sumy. Russians are obviously attempting to advance to seize the city. The Institute for the Study of War, however, analyzes the situation for you.
Russian forces likely intend to leverage intensified drone and artillery strikes against the city to support further advances towards Sumy city, and likely aspire to conduct an offensive operation to seize the city in the future. ISW continues to assess that Russian forces are highly unlikely to be able to seize Sumy city in the near to medium term, as Russian forces have not seized a Ukrainian city with a pre-war population greater than 100,000 since July 2022. From the Institute for the Study of War, 4.
The United Kingdom will spend an additional £2 billion, which is approximately $2.7 billion, on developing drone technologies using tactics that were refined during the war in Ukraine. This is outlined in a strategic defence review published by the British government, reports The Guardian. The document states that the priorities of the plan include inexpensive one-way assault drones, more expansive reusable systems, and the establishment of a drone hub to facilitate knowledge sharing and improve coordination amongst the armed forces. UK Defence Secretary John Healey told members of Parliament that the army would become 10 times more lethal thanks to the combination of technologies like drones and artificial intelligence with the heavy metal of tanks and artillery. It was part of a wider commitment to make the UK battle-ready, in the words of Prime Minister Keir Starmer.
Third, we will innovate and accelerate innovation at a wartime pace, so we can meet the threats of today and of tomorrow as the fastest innovator in NATO. Now, this doesn't mean replacing people or hardware. Quite the opposite. It means learning the lessons of Ukraine, which I've discussed many times with President Zelenskyy, to ensure that every capability we have works seamlessly together.
The UK also plans to purchase F-35A fighter jets from the United States, which are capable of carrying nuclear weapons. According to The Times, this decision is tied to the growing military threat posed by Russia. That's right. In addition, Defence Secretary John Healey announced the launch of a large-scale new investment programme aimed at arms production. More details please find in a report by Nikita Skoblikov.
The United Kingdom will allocate £6 billion, around €7 billion, to develop its defence industrial complex, according to Defence Secretary John Healey. The funding will go toward the production of ammunition and explosives, as well as the procurement of long-range strike systems, specifically drones and missiles. The British government also plans to finance the construction of at least several new defence factories, which is expected to create around 1,800 jobs.
We're announcing the £6 billion for munitions, including at least 6 new munitions factories. This is about the readiness of our forces to fight and therefore to deter the wars of the future, but it's also about the readiness of our industry. That's the lesson from Ukraine. An armed forces is only as strong as the industry that stands behind it.
Furthermore, according to The Times, in response to the growing threat from Russia, London has decided to purchase F-35A fighter jets from the United States, aircraft capable of carrying nuclear weapons. Experts say this move represents the most significant shift in the UK's nuclear deterrence posture since the Cold War.
The world is more uncertain. The tensions are greater, but we prepare for war in order to secure the peace. If you're strong enough to defeat an enemy, you deter them from attacking in the first place. That's what has made NATO the most successful defensive alliance in history. For over 70 years, it's helped keep the peace and the stability in Europe. And so it's the same principle now. Faced with greater conflicts, faced with greater uncertainties, we have to be more ready to fight in order to avoid the wars we do not want to fight.
Meanwhile, Russia continues its path toward militarization. On May 30th, President Putin signed a decree allowing the government to take control of defense enterprises if they fail to meet state contracts during a period of martial law. Analysts at the Institute for the Study of War, ISW, believe this effectively gives the Kremlin the legal authority to fully control key sectors of the economy under conditions of mobilization.
The Kremlin is continuing efforts to prepare Russian society and the Russian defense industry base for a protracted war with Ukraine and potential future war with NATO. Putin is likely setting legal conditions to allow the Russian government to commandeer elements of Russia's economy and defense industry base should the Kremlin introduce full martial law in order to transition the country to a full wartime footing. ISW continues to assess that the Kremlin is preparing Russian society and economy for a protracted war in Ukraine, indicating that Russia is not interested in engaging in good faith negotiations to reach a diplomatic settlement to its war in Ukraine. From the ISW publication,
in addition to the UK, Sweden is also preparing for a possible military confrontation with the Russian Federation. In comments to Bloomberg, Swedish Defense Minister Pål Jonson said Stockholm intends to increase defense spending to 5% of its GDP. Speaking at a security conference in Singapore, the minister discussed the rising hybrid threat posed by Moscow.
In my immediate neighborhood in the Baltic Sea, we're faced with increasing hybrid operations, ranging from acts of sabotage, threats against undersea critical infrastructure, and challenges posed by Russia's shadow fleet.
The NATO country currently closest to reaching the 5% defense spending target is Poland. Warsaw now allocates 4.7% of its GDP to defense, the highest figure among all NATO members. According to NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte, the upcoming summit in The Hague will focus on establishing a common target for defense spending across the alliance. Reported by Nikita Skoblikov, UATV News.
Well, that seems to be it, folks, for today. My name is Ernie Keane. We are UATV English. We were online. Thank you so very much for watching. Your subscription is very important to us as Ukraine is craving the same values you are, freedom and sovereignty of state. It was News Pulse. Stay tuned for more and see you in the next beat. Goodbye.